she went to the police and told them that she met Rami at a house party when she was just 12 years old and that he had started grooming her almost immediately. She said that for a long time, Rami made her feel like she was his girlfriend. Ellie recalled that at one particular party, Rami asked if she would do him a massive favour, which was to go and have sex with one of his friends. Because Ellie was so young and thought that Rami was her boyfriend and she would do anything to please him, she went through with this request and slept with his friend. Rami told her that this wouldn't happen again and that it was just a one-off, but it wasn't. Ellie said that this started happening more and more frequently, and eventually she realised that Rami was receiving money from these men in order to have sex with her. So detectives are listening to the story in horror, wondering what on earth is going on in their quiet seaside town. Ellie went on to report that things had escalated and she was now being taken to various homes to meet multiple men at the same time. She claimed that some of these houses were in Rochdale and Oldham, which are a couple of hours away from where she lived. She claimed that Rami was the organiser of a huge group of men and organised crime. She also said that Rami had tried to sell her in Amsterdam for 25,000 euros. She wrote a list of names and descriptions of more than 50 girls that she said were also victims of this group. So police are worried for Ellie's safety because she had come to them about this group and they worried that her life could be in danger, so they arranged for her to live in new accommodation outside of Barrow. Rami was quickly arrested and brought in for questioning. When asked about all of this, Rami said that he barely knew Ellie, let alone had spent any time with her alone. Detectives reeled off the list of crimes, places and times that Ellie had given them, and Rami was dumbfounded. He couldn't believe what he was hearing and denied everything. He went on to say, "I feel disgusted that my name is being tarnished with something like that. I'm an innocent man being persecuted." After almost 48 hours in custody and hours of interviews, the police concluded that they didn't have enough evidence to hold Rami, and so he was released on bail. But Ellie's allegations were so serious that the local police station wanted outside resources to help set up a major investigations team. Over the following months, Ellie would become a regular face at the police station. She was working closely with the team and would share as much information with them as she could. She told them that she had been forced to go to Blackpool on June 30th and was told that she was very valuable and that this place could make more money for her. Police said that she gave a huge amount of detail and specifics about everything, with descriptions of shops that she saw in the Blackpool area, sounds that she heard, street lights, calendars that people had on their walls, and what colour the wallpaper was in the place that she was taken to. So police then asked Ellie if she would be willing to go to Blackpool with them in an unmarked car and drive around so that she could point out the locations of where she was taken, and she agreed to this. However, as soon as they reached Blackpool, it seemed like Ellie all of a sudden forgot all these details and couldn't locate where she was or where she was taken. Investigators asked her if she remembered what was outside when the car she was in had stopped, and she said, "I don't know." So now they're in Blackpool, trying to find out where she was taken. Ellie's just coming up with, "I don't know, I'm not sure," and this went on for 2 days. Other officers went to various hotels and B&Bs in the Blackpool area she thought she was going to die. She said she couldn't remember anything after that she then woke up in her own house and started receiving messages on Snapchat from Cameron, one of which said, drugged ya, fucked ya, mugged ya, left ya, laughed at ya, I've got HIV. So terrified from this message and that she might now have HIV, she went straight to the hospital. When questioned, 22-year-old Cameron was confused and horrified. He denied that anything had ever happened between him and Ellie. He said that yes, Ellie did come to his party, but she was so drunk at one point that he contacted her sister to come and pick her up because he was worried about her and wanted to make sure that she got home okay. When they showed him the Snapchat screenshots of his conversation with Ellie, he was baffled and said, that can't be me, it simply isn't true. He was let go and Ellie eventually said that she was dropping all charges against him. However, he remained on bail and the police's radar for a further 6 months after this. 2 years later, Ellie's now 19 and she's living in her own flat or apartment. She said she was sick of the frequent fights that she was having with her mum and her stepdad and that she needed her own space, so she moved out. Then on May 9th, Ellie contacted the police again. During the 999 call, she said that someone was in her flat and wouldn't leave. Eventually, her brother's girlfriend made a call to 999 saying that she'd been driving around searching for Ellie late one night and found her stumbling alone on a bridge. She got Ellie into her car and dropped her home, making sure that she got in safely. 20 minutes later, the police turn up at Ellie's home ready to arrest her. And at this point, it's late and it's about 10 to 1 in the morning. When Ellie opened the door, she was in a terrible state. She was bleeding from her mouth, her eyes were swollen, and her shoulders were covered in red marks, and she could barely speak. Now, this is not what police were expecting to find, because her brother's girlfriend had dropped her home, and at that point there was no indication given to them that she was injured or in a bad way just 20 minutes ago. So police took her to the hospital, and this is where Ellie now named another person, someone called Oliver. She said that she had been forced to go and meet Oliver in Preston, where he made her take drugs and proceeded to grape her. She claimed that he was part of a sex trafficking ring in Ibiza, and that she had his number so that they could track him down. Ellie at the hospital is very intoxicated, and she admitted to drinking alcohol, smoking weed, and smoking something called spice, which I had never heard of, but apparently spice is a synthetic drug that's meant to mimic the effect of cannabis, but it's far more potent. And it's often referred to as the zombie drug because it can cause seizures, extreme anxiety, and even psychosis. So the police start to investigate these new claims of Ellie's, and they did find CCTV of Ellie getting off the train at Preston, like she said. They were also able to locate Oliver on cameras. Officers went and spoke to Ollie, and it turns out that he was a trainee electrician and had been out in town that night celebrating a birthday when he met Ellie randomly. He said he'd gone up to her to ask to use her lighter. He said that they chatted for about 20 minutes and then they walked into an alleyway where he admitted that they did kiss and had a very embarrassingly clumsy sexual encounter. And then just over a minute later, Ellie can be seen on CCTV walking back out of the alleyway, lighting a cigarette and walking off. She then went into some public toilets where it was caught on camera that she stood in front of the mirror, rubbing her eyes for a really long time. Like, it didn't look as if she had something in her eye that she was trying to get out or something. It looked as if she was rubbing her eyes fiercely to make her makeup smudge on purpose. She then got onto her train and headed back to Barrow. And this was all just an hour or so before the police turned up at her door, and at this point on CCTV she had no injuries to her face. Oliver had even sent her a message asking her to add him on Snapchat because he was hoping to see her again. He said he thought she was gorgeous and that he was happy that he met her. He said that Ellie told him that she was from Wigan and was going to work in one of the nightclubs in Preston, neither of which are true. He admitted that he called her to try and arrange to meet her again because he wanted to see her again. The police said from their examination it seemed to be a totally random encounter, and Oliver appeared to genuinely quite like Ellie. So she's told police that this Oliver guy has assaulted her, and now she's telling them that when she got after being given a backstreet abortion using knitting needles. But there are no medical or hospital records confirming that Ellie ever gave birth or that she was ever in a coma. After all of this, Ellie Williams was finally arrested and charged with perverting the course of justice. The police then presented her with the CCTV footage that they had obtained from the Savoy Hotel in Blackpool. And of course, Ellie then changes her story. She said that the men in the gang had found out that she was informing the police of what was happening to her, and so she felt like her life was in danger and decided to hide out in hotels. She went on to say to a police officer, "I am really, really sorry for it, but I haven't felt safe enough." But basically they know that I've been speaking to the police, and they told me to tell you certain things that would put you off the scent of them so you can't trace them. The policeman goes on to tell her that because of all the lies she's told, it's very difficult to believe her now. To which Ellie responded, "It's hard to believe the truth because of lies I've said. I get it, I do get it, but I don't get these bruises for no reason, you know." The officer then goes on to ask her how she got those bruises, and Ellie just says, "You tell me." So the officer says, "I think they're self-inflicted," and she responds, "Are you having a laugh?" Then when officers pointed out that they could check her flight records to corroborate her story about being trafficked in Ibiza, she admitted that that wasn't true. And as officers began to investigate more, her lies began to unravel. When she claimed that she had been in Amsterdam with Rami and that he tried to sell her at an auction, she was in Amsterdam at the time, but with her sister and her sister's boyfriend sharing a room with them. And bank records proved that Rami had been at a shop called B&Q in England on that very same day. So with her partial admissions now starting to come out, the court agreed to release Jordan Trangrove, who she had accused of raping her and was awaiting trial for this. So he was released after being in the sex offenders wing for 10 weeks. Jordan said that prison was disgusting, that he was in there with serious criminals and he knew he hadn't done anything to deserve being there and that it was not a nice place to be. And within months of his release, Jordan had to move away from Barrow because people in the area still thought he was guilty. He said he would get rapist shouted at him from across the street. He was barred from everywhere. He wasn't allowed into any clubs or pubs. And he said it was clear that no matter where he went, someone would always know what he'd been accused of and that it was ruining his life. Ellie was let out on bail and went back to live at her mum's house, and she was given a strict curfew. And almost a year would pass whilst police compiled their case against Ellie. So now fast forward to 19th May 2020 and Ellie's family reports her missing again. She's now been reported missing more than 30 times in just 1 year. Officers finally found her late one night standing in a field, dressed all in black with her hood up, carrying a rucksack. She was talking very fast and was agitated. And as they got closer, they could see that she was covered in blood, had black eyes, and the tip of one of her fingers was almost cut off. When they got her into the police car and started questioning her, she said she had been dragged into a car and taken to a house where she had been beaten and raped by 10 Asian men. Now these injuries that she had were the most extreme that the police had seen of her so far, so they took her to hospital. The next morning, the police went back to the field where they found her to look for any more clues, and they quickly found a hammer covered in blood, which they took in for testing. Apparently her injuries were so said that they felt like they were watching someone take things to such extremes that she could end up taking her own life, and that she was clearly extremely troubled. She was drinking a lot, taking drugs like spice and cocaine, running away, and allegedly making attempts to end her own life. As she had broken her bail conditions, they were able to rearrest her. But little did police know that whilst she was sat in custody, her Facebook post was going viral and causing havoc among members of the community. Detectives ended up seizing 8 more hammers from Ellie's flat, as well as multiple mobile phones. Experts spent time trawling through the vast amounts of accounts and messages that she had. Ellie would largely use Snapchat to talk to people, and they were able to get access to her Snapchat data. Professor Lee Grant, an expert in forensic linguistics, examined the messages between her and her alleged attackers, and he said he found a significant similarity between the words and phrases in all the disputed messages, and he concluded that she had written them all herself. Between October and December of 2019, Ellie was chatting to someone she knew from school called Harry Cooper. They had been flirting over messages, and when the messages became more sexual, she changed his contact information in her phone to the name Haram, which is someone that she told the police was a trafficker attempting to groom her. She then changed his name again later to Rami, so that when Harry called her, she could show it to the police and it would look like Rami had been making these phone calls. She even wrote letters to herself pretending to be Rami, acting as if he was writing to her to apologise for the things that he'd done. Snapchat data was also able to confirm that Jordan Trengrove's Snapchat account, TrenG7, was actually created by Ellie. Another phone, which was registered to Ellie's address, was used to create an account under the name Rolo Kelsey, someone that she completely made up and claimed was a trafficker. There was another account under the name Saucer that was also created by her. In early July of 2019, she used another mobile phone which had actually been given to her by a Barrow charity that supports female victims of violence and abuse called Women's Community Matters, to send herself messages from another so-called trafficking victim called Nicole. So she even got a phone from this group that supports women to send messages to herself. Every single allegation that she had made, police could pick apart, either using phone data or CCTV footage. Then the testing on the hammer came back, and there was only one person's DNA on it, and that belonged to Ellie. A pathologist concluded that her injuries were consistent with self-inflicted blows using her right hand. Police were also able to find CCTV footage showing Ellie purchasing that hammer that was found in the field, and it also confirmed that she had been on her own the entire time. So a 10-week trial would begin in October 2022. Dr. Lucy Bacon, a forensic psychiatrist who assessed Ellie many times, diagnosed complex post-traumatic stress disorder resulting from childhood trauma. She said she displayed all the key symptoms, including suicidal ideation and substance misuse. She said she suspected undisclosed SA in childhood and that social services had been involved in the home until she was 8. However, Dr. Martin Locke, who worked on behalf of the prosecution, said he was not able to diagnose Ellie with any psychiatric disorder. A big part of the prosecution's evidence was the hammer and the self-inflicted wounds, but in court Ellie denied hitting herself with any course, I've considered whether the apparent nature of these offences means that I should assume that the defendant is suffering from some mental impairment. There is no explanation of why the defendant would commit these offences, but I cannot conclude that she chose to make her Facebook post on the 20th of May 2020 for any other reason than she intended to create an impact within the town. I accept that there was no direct incitement to do anything. We are aware that sex trafficking of young females does occur. There is a risk that genuine victims will, as a result of this defendant's actions, feel deterred from reporting it. A young woman whose lives tore a community apart and drove 3 men to attempt taking their own lives is starting a long jail sentence tonight. That was the judge's statement, and it was longer than that. 22-year-old Ellie Williams was eventually jailed for 8.5 years and is first eligible for parole in 2027. A petition to extend her sentence was rejected, as well as Ellie's appeal against her own sentence. Through an apology letter to the judge, Ellie partially admitted her lies, saying she had done wrong on some things, and she added that she wasn't thinking straight when she made the Facebook post. Rami says he's now supporting Jordan Trangrove, who had spent 10 weeks in jail from Ellie's accusations. Both of them say that they tried to take their own lives because of the stress of this whole ordeal. Rami says it almost tore his family apart, and for Jordan the stress eventually did cause him and his partner to break up. She had tried to support him through all of these accusations, but even after Ellie going to jail, Jordan's mental health was such a mess that the strain broke their relationship apart. realised he struggled to bond with his son as her trial kept getting postponed. Oliver stopped working and studying after the accusations and spent a lot of time seeking treatment for mental health issues. And Cameron said the abuse he got online was so bad that he became scared to pick up his son from nursery because of what could happen to him. Even men that hadn't been named by Ellie found themselves watching over their shoulders as they walked down the street, and that they still feel the aftermath today. Absolutely wild that someone would go to these lengths to make up horrific accusations. I mean, hitting yourself with a hammer is just unimaginable. And yet, I do believe that that's what she was doing. Unfortunately, I have known people in real life that have made up crazy stories. Nothing quite this extreme, but enough to make me believe that someone could make all of this up. Unfortunately, there are very sick individuals out there that, and when I say sick, I don't just mean evil, I mean they must be mentally ill, you know, to go to these extremes to make up these kinds of lies. But I know that people do. And it's scary. That's very scary that people will go to these lengths. And, you know, why was she doing it? Was it that she wanted attention? Or was it a cry for help for something else and she just couldn't say what the thing was? I don't know. But, yeah, it's just a very scary thought that there are people that will make these horrific claims of the amount of lives that she's ruined and impacted because of this lie. I don't know how people heal from that, and I hope they do. I hope they find peace eventually. To be honest, I feel like 8.5 years for the amount of damage she's caused isn't really enough. And also, is she being rehabilitated? This is the thing, right? People go